Michael joining us with all these crazy NFL storylines. Michael, Dak Prescott in this second surgery. Do you think there's anything weird about this or anything sketchy about this that should make Cowboy fans more nervous, or just procedural and nothing that should affect his contract negotiation?
Without really knowing the details, I mean, typically guys have second surgeries to kind of clear things out, to kind of correct or reinforce whatever happened in the first one. So it doesn't really alarm me. Obviously it's important that they get it right. It isn't important how many times they got to get it right. So I look at it that way, and then you just move forward with it. So it doesn't surprise me that there could be loose particles that they had to clear out that they didn't anticipate. But if it's beyond that, then of course you're worried, but it doesn't sound like that.
Where do you see the negotiation going from here? Our opinion is Dak has all the leverage. At worst, he gets franchise tagged again, and then he can become an unrestricted free agent unless Jerry and Steven give him what he wants. How do you see it?
Well, I think giving him what he wants is going to be really a challenge, because if you're Todd France, Todd France isn't going to admit that Patrick Mahomes is better than Dak, even though he is. Todd France isn't going to admit that Deshaun Watson's better than Dak, even though he is. Todd France isn't going to admit that Aaron Rodgers is better than Dak, even though he is. And so that because of the situation, the market is so that it's no longer who's better and who deserves more; it's who can get more. And and I think that unless Jerry and Steven are willing to get him into that $40 million a year range, near Deshaun Watson, I mean, they really don't have much more that they could do. And this is the power of Mahomes doing his deal at 45 and Deshaun coming in right around 40. It gives the market, it lets you set the market, and agents typically will pretend that their player's better than even though the best player in the league. So I think it's a really hard contract to do because of the way the market's set up and the way France has waited to be able to gain this leverage, in the sense that even though he knows his player isn't better than the two highest paid quarterbacks, he doesn't have to settle for less than that.
Michael, is it crazy to think that Jerry and Steven would maybe make some phone calls to Seattle on Russ or Houston for Deshaun, or is that too dangerous if that gets out? That, hey, we don't have our guy signed. He's coming off of surgery. These quarterbacks are better. Do you think it's crazy that those phone calls could be made?
I think that's a lot of talk radio. I don't think anybody's, look, here's the hardest part to do in the National Football League is to get a franchise quarterback. So why would I give up one? Now, I know Cowboy fans want their guy, and every team wants their guy, but the reality of it is when you get a franchise quarterback, you're not going to give them up. You're going to make sure that you keep them. And I think Seattle, look, Russell's right. They got to do a better job protecting him. There's no doubt. He's taken way too many hits for a little guy. So they got to do a better job protecting him. Deshaun Watson, we haven't heard from Deshaun Watson, but let's put Deshaun Watson in real perspective here. Let's say 150 days ago, Deshaun Watson cashed a check. He stayed up all night, cried when he deposited that check, signing bonus check that was written by Cal McNair, that had already been deposited in his account after they traded DeAndre Hopkins. So what is he upset about? Well, he cashed a check when Hopkins was gone. He cashed a check that had McNair's name on it. So we know the owner and the Hopkins being gone didn't stop him from negotiating a 4-year contract, that he stayed awake to watch it deposit. So what has happened since in these last 150 days? That's Nick Cesario's challenge. If you want to believe everything you read in the media, and you want to believe everything on one side of the story, which is being orchestrated by Watson's agent, he's taking an advertisement out. If you want to buy that, then go ahead. But as a general manager, you got to ignore that because you know where this story's coming from. It's coming from one person. It can only come from one person, and you've got to ignore it. You've got to get in a room with Watson. You've got to sit him down and say, what's the deal? What happened? What happened? You stayed awake. You cried. You loved being here. You wanted a no-trade clause in your contract so we wouldn't get rid of you. So Tell me what's going on.
Michael Lombardi joining us here on 105.3 The Fan. Considering there's going to be a reduced cap number, you have to get Dak signed, obviously, offensive line help, a lot of stuff on the defense. How do you prioritize the Cowboys offseason then to be able to add stuff by still staying under this cap?
Well, I think, you got to try to get Dak done to a contract that you can live with. The problem is how do you do it if you have to franchise Dak, right? How do you work around that number? Because that number's – and that's the leverage that France has. France's leverage is the fact that you want to reduce your cap. Now, Jerry and Steven will get it down. They'll get it below, but it'll keep them in gridlock for a while. They'll get it below. It won't give them a chance to improve the team. So now, basically, you're putting it to Dak. Dak, do you want to win, or do you just want to hold us ransom? I mean, what do you want to do? Like, the longer we go without doing a deal, you're just hurting yourself. Because, we'll keep you at $45 million or whatever the franchise number is. We'll have nobody to block for you. You'll get hurt again. That's what you want. Go ahead, let's do that. But if you want to help the football team, if you want to win a championship like you talk about doing, then let's get some kind of deal done here so we can lower our cap number. I'm not trying to save money here. I'm trying to invest money into the team. But the longer you hold me in gridlock, the longer you continue to do this, you're not helping yourself. You're hurting your team. And I think that's the conversation you have to have with France.
Michael, what else does this team need to address other than the quarterback? I mean, I don't see any pieces on defense except for Lawrence, maybe Diggs as a corner. What else does this team need to address? Or do you start up front with that offensive line with the issues they had with Tyron Smith and other guys who were missing?
I think what we learned in the Super Bowl, right? What did we take from the Super Bowl? That football, the game hasn't changed. It hasn't changed over the last century, right? It's still a game about offensive and defensive linemen. It's still a game about quarterbacks. And if you don't have blue chip offensive linemen and blue chip defensive linemen and a blue chip quarterback, you're not going to compete for a championship. So, go to ESPN today and look at the mock draft, the first mock draft. It's got 9 receivers in the first round or whatever it has. Like, seriously, does anybody understand how to build a football team? Like, I love receivers, but if you can't block, like the Chiefs couldn't in the Super Bowl, what good is having receivers? If you can't control the line of scrimmage, what good is having a receiver? It's great for fantasy. We're talking about championship team building. So it's really not a hard question. When you ask that, it's not related to the Cowboys. It's not related to the Bengals. It's related to every team. Build the lines, offensive and defensive lines, and have a quarterback. And then everything else kind of falls into place when you get there. And when you get sidetracked away from those 2 lines, you end up like Kansas City, playing a Super Bowl with backup tackles, with the greatest quarterback, right? He's incredible, with the best receiver in football. Tyreek Hill is the best receiver in football. Nobody's going to say he's not. Kelsey's the best tight end in football. No one's going to say he's not. Couldn't get the ball to him because they couldn't block, and the defense wouldn't count the 5 Mississippi. So what good is having the best receiver and the best tight end and the best quarterback if you can't protect?
But is that fair with Kansas? I mean, they did spend the number 1 pick on a left tackle, and he just happened to be hurt. I mean, he was hurt. Like, what are you going to do?
Right,
Everybody
but
with
he's
backups
older,
is
too.
gonna
They
suck.
spent that pick in 13. I mean, just because he's the first pick overall in the draft, I mean, Fisher's never been a great player. You go back and watch them play against New England when they scored 24 points in 3 minutes and 13 seconds in the fourth quarter. New England did a great job of making both those tackles and making Mahomes feel uncomfortable. Look, the reality of stopping Mahomes is not in coverage. The reality of stopping any great quarterback has nothing to do with what coverage you're running. It has everything to do with how you pressure the passer. If you don't hit the quarterback or make him feel pressure, you're never going to slow down a great quarterback. And I think that's what we learned from the Super Bowl. The Chiefs got caught without an offensive line. They had no depth. It happens to all of us. And he was able to overcome it. Through a lot of games, he could overcome it. But sometimes when you play the best games, you get to the championship level game, you can't overcome the one area that becomes hard to hide. And Andy Reid couldn't hide it.
Do we blame Reid for not being able to make any adjustments during the game?
I think you doubt. I think to me, what was shocking to me, and I said this on my show, the Lombardi Line on VSiN, I said it on my podcast. I love the Hilaire over total of 26 yards. I thought it was a steal. I thought you were just giving away money with that deal. And people laughed at me. Why? Because I knew Todd Bowles was going to play quarter coverage. I knew Todd Bowles was going to play split safety. And when you play split safety in the National Football League, you got to run the ball. You've got 7 in the box. You got to run the football. You've got to be able to run the ball. Hilaire ran it when they gave him 9 carries. He had 68 yards. The problem is if you don't call runs, you're not running the ball. Andy got back to being Andy of the old. He decided to just throw the ball on every play. And it just didn't play. I mean, they blitzed him. He was in 5-man protection other than 9 plays in the game. I mean, those 2 tackles, as bad as they were single blocking. You can't block with Mike Reimers, who's not even a left tackle. It's really kind of unfair to Reimers to ask him to block Shaq Barrett or Jason Pierre-Paul at left tackle when he's not even equipped to be a left tackle.
Michael Lombardi bringing it strong as always on the home of the Cowboys, 105.3 The Fan. We obviously have an interest with what's going on with Carson Wentz and the Philly QB situation. What's going to happen here, Michael? Is it going to be the Bears or the Colts, or do you see another team sneaking in, or do you see Wentz actually staying there?
I think, well, look, I think it's going to be hard for Wentz to stay there. They've gone out there. They've taken an advertisement wherever they can to say that they've had unbelievable interest and they've got all these offers and they've got a blockbuster deal. But guess what? Everybody called their bluff. Everybody said, wait a minute, who's in this? Who's really in this? The Colts said, well, the Bears must be getting them because we're not in it. We're not paying that price the Eagles want. The Bears are saying, we're not paying that price the Eagles want. The 49ers, we're not paying that. So who's in it? So the story became really a PR story that was spun by the Eagles, though we have all this interest in them. Now we're going to find out really what they're willing to take for the guy. Nobody was willing to pay 2 1s and a 3, which is what they were asking. And so that's the problem. And they're going to have to figure either they lower their price, which I think they will, or they just say to themselves, look, we're not going to trade up, which I don't think they will. But you can't ask for 2 number 1s and a 3 and then take on a contract that owes $45 million on a quarterback that you're not sure can play anymore. The quarterback's broken. I mean, he's gotten hit so many times, his eye level is down. He can't stay that way. It's going to be a major project to recreate him again to the player that he was in 17. Quarterbacks are like boxers. When they get hit too much, their eye level comes down, and they can't stand back there, and they'll check the ball down quickly because they're worried about getting hit. It takes a time to get that built back up again in the quarterback.
Do you see Belichick making a splash for a quarterback this offseason? Did this title by Tom kind of light some, pressure fire under his butt to get a quarterback in there?
I think the fact he had no passing game lit a fire under his butt this year, that he won 7 games really without having a passing game and lost 9, and the fact that he needs to improve his team. I think that was instrumental in his look. He's smarter than I am, so he knows he needs a quarterback more than anybody, and he's got to figure out a way to get one. And it's hard to get one after Tom Brady, and Tom's the greatest of all time. So you got to find somebody who can come in there and handle the pressure of replacing Tom, but also handle the reality of the situation and know that we need to be able to perform at the quarterback level. Look, there's a lot of teams looking for quarterbacks. There's just not a lot of them out there.
Will Derek Carr get moved? Do you think the Raiders will move on from Carr?
They floated. I think at some point they definitely have talked about it. I think the problem with trading Carr is, who do they love? Do they love Mariota? Now today they've put it out there, and when you read these reports, you've got to understand. This is the brilliance of Al Davis, and this is what he would tell me all the time: is you got to understand where the story's coming from, right? Like, you just can't read a story and say, oh, they're going to trade. They're going to trade. Who's putting the story out? Why is the story coming out? Why did the Eagles announce? Why did it come out Friday before the Super Bowl that Wentz was going to be in a blockbuster deal? Because somebody wanted to drive up interest. Somebody wanted to create panic amongst other teams. That's the story. Today's story is the Raiders might trade Mariota and not Carr. Well, they want to see what they can get for Mariota. They want to compare what they could get. They kind of know what they're going to get for Carr. Teams have called them about Carr. Now they got to find out what they can get for Mariota. So it's really just an advertisement more than a reality.
I've been listening to you forecast Urban Meyer, Jacksonville. You said Stafford would get traded within a week, that the Raiders need to decide what to do about Carr, all that on your GM Shuffle podcast. Is there another move that the rest of us are not talking about, something that's lingering beneath the surface, Michael, that you think could stun all of us out there?
Well, I mean, obviously this quarterback market's going to stun us. I think San Francisco, the fact that they're looking for a quarterback is, they've made no bones about it. They were in the Stafford conversation. The fact that Stafford went to the Rams makes them even more inclined to try to change their quarterback. Do they love Jimmy? No. Will they replace Jimmy? Yes. Will they keep Jimmy? Probably. So I think the quarterback situation will continue to go on as time moves. And I think all those moves will be kind of interesting to see how it plays out. I think the Jets hold the key. What do they do with Darnold? Do they draft Zach Wilson? And then obviously what do the Jets do? I mean, what does Miami do? Do they really love Tua? Do they truly believe Tua is the guy? I think a lot of people in America think Tua, because he played at Alabama, is a great quarterback. But I think people that study the NFL and watch NFL tape realize that he's got some limitations in terms of how talented is he as a player, how strong is his arm, how fast is he, and will the Dolphins see that and then make a move? I think those are the conversations we're going to have going forward.
Last one, Michael. Would Richard Sherman or Patrick Peterson make sense, even at their age, in the Cowboys secondary?
So let's put this in perspective, right? The Cowboys, Dan Quinn, right? It's 80% zone. It's not a man concept. It's Pete Carroll's defense, which, frankly, we could have a whole conversation about how Pete Carroll's defense is dead in the NFL. It's really dead. And for them to put any money into the secondary is really ridiculous because Pete Carroll's defense is all about the front. You've got to dominate the front. That's why Pete can't even run his own defense in Seattle. He doesn't have Michael Bennett. He doesn't have Cliff Averill. He doesn't have all those guys that he had when he was really humming, right? You've got to have a dominant defensive front to run Pete's cover 3 system. It's 85 to 90% zone. It's a 3-deep coverage with a big player on the inside. That's what you have to have. So for them to spend money on Richard Sherman or Patrick Peterson is really, they need to spend money on a 3 technique. They need to spend money on defensive ends and defensive tackles. That's how the scheme works. Now, we could debate whether the scheme's dead because I truly believe it is. People have attacked it at highest levels. And unless you have the talent that San Francisco had in terms of all those guys, but when San Francisco didn't have talent, it became a little problematic for them to play that coverage as well. So for me, I would pass.
Michael, the absolute best. Thank you so much for all the info and the knowledge, and we'll be catching up with you again soon. Enjoy the offseason.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.